pray for our city and state and leaders in the country, Father. We just ask that you would guide and protect them, and where wisdom is needed this evening, we ask that you would grant that as well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We could take a moment and silence our cell phones. Normally that's not something I have to mention, but there's such a crowd. So we'll have citizen input on non-agenda items. Everybody has an agenda. So is there any citizen input on a non-agenda item? Okay. We do not have any minutes from our last meeting, so we'll move right along. We will consider a request for site and design review in a minor partition to construct 2 triplex buildings, each on an individual lot at 431 South Township Road. That would be DR 16-05/MLP 16-02 Monin Construction. So the matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please be prepared to step forward to the microphone at the appropriate time. State your name, mailing address, and interest in the matter. For those people other than the applicants that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please sign in on the sheet or speak up when we call for testimony. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each, the opponents will be given 5 minutes each, and those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair, and any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. You guys good? You good? Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time.
I did go to the site.
Pardon me?
I did go to the site.
Went to the site. Okay, so does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we'll have the staff report from Brian, and then questions from us to Brian. And then we will open the public hearing. The applicant will testify not more than 15 minutes. Opponents not more than 5 minutes each. Opponents not more than 5 minutes each. Neutral not more than 5 minutes each. And rebuttal by applicant not more than 10 minutes. At that time, we will close the public testimony. Then we'll have questions, and then we will have discussion and deliberation by us. No testimony unless specifically allowed by me. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date that you will receive. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Brian.
Thank you, Chair Savory, and welcome planning commissioners and to the audience. This request tonight does involve two different applications. One is a partition that takes the existing tract and divides it into two in a kind of flag lot type arrangement. And then it takes a site and design review. Both of those applications requiring a public hearing and your decision to review the proposed development, which is 2 triplexes to be built. So 6 dwelling units and 2 individual buildings on the tract. This shows you, in a little bit of slide there, located on the south side of Township Road. It's 95 feet west of the intersection with Locust Street that is on the south side of Township Road. And this is a zoning map. And the property on the zoning map is here on Township Road, this first tract right here. And so there's Lupine. And you have 6 properties adjacent to this tract that's being developed. You have 3 on the east side. You have 2 other lots along the south edge, and then you have the lot on the east side. And what this map, what the zoning map is showing is that the property and those on either side are actually zoned R1.5, which is our medium density residential zone, which does allow single-family homes, but also allows higher intensity uses such as duplexes and triplexes. And here's an aerial that shows you what I just pointed out, and you can see the 3 homes over to the east side, and you can see a couple homes to the south, and the homes themselves are set back a ways. We have a couple sheds up here close to the back of this property, and then we have one large home up towards the front of the lot on the west side. And this existing home on the tract itself to be demolished, and it actually has 2 driveways today, one on the east side and one on the west side, and that became a critical issue in the early on review of this when a traffic study was performed and indicated that the driveway needed to be shifted to the west in order to provide greater sight distance up and down the street when you're pulling out of that particular driveway. The problem is very obvious if you're out here and you notice that there's a fence along this property here. And so when you pull out this driveway, you have to pull almost out into the street before you can see around the fence that location. So that's why the driveway was requested to be moved, and they did that after the traffic study was completed. This ends site plan for the development, and it shows a dashed line here, which is a proposed property boundary, and then dashed line here, which is the flag arm. So you have a lot back here with an arm out to the street, and then you have another lot created here. And so then you have a triplex building sitting on this lot and a triplex building on this, and they appear to be almost identical buildings as far as I could tell by looking at the facade elevations and such. And they all have a garage, and then they also have an extra parking area right here to help the development meet the ordinance requirements on parking, which is outlined in the staff report. I might go ahead and mention at this point, we did receive 2 written letters from the public, the general public. I think I wrote down that one of the citizens owns property at 396 South Locust Street at number 5 and stated concerns for the large apartment complex in the area because what you see today are single-family homes in the area. And then another citizen owns property at 599 South Lupine Street, and which would be on the east side. I believe it's probably the middle lot on the east side there. And they stated concerns that included fencing and screening, setbacks, and other issues that could impact their adjacent property. We only had a response from the city engineer, which has been included in your report. We did not have any other written response from our other agencies. The file and the record is here, in case we need to refer to that for anything. And this shows the kind of the appearance of these triplexes. They're 2 stories tall. And as I mentioned, it's 3 units in each building. So you have the end units that are always maybe slightly more desirable because they have windows on the ends as well. And then the middle unit doesn't have that opportunity for the windows on the side. They have porches that you can see that extend out from the facade. And there's a connection from the street in front of each of these with a sidewalk, so everyone can walk out their front porch onto a sidewalk that then goes on the private properties out to the public street, and that is a requirement in the city ordinance for that. This is a landscape plan, and what's kind of highlighted in the dark green is apparently partly a response to a neighborhood meeting. I read the minutes. I wasn't there at the meeting. Applicant might want to talk about it, but I think this neighbor here is one of the written letters that we had, and they specifically had asked for screening because the cars drive in here, and when they're heading this direction, pointing straight into this lot, they wanted to have the car headlights blocked until they turn and park into their parking spaces. So about 26 arborvitae are planned along this particular area to solve that particular concern. And the landscape plan looked fairly diverse and looked suitable to staff. They also have an outdoor open space planned here. I'm not quite sure the nature of it, but it looks like it's somewhat of a patio that's open and can be shared by everyone that lives in the complex. And then along the west side, they're actually creating a tract that is for a bio retention or detention facility for stormwater runoff. It collects all the runoff, and then if there's ever a significant storm, it will overflow into a dry well that's located about here in the parking area. And so it kind of treats the runoff before it ever flows into the groundwater, or we try to keep it from the groundwater into these dry wells. I think there's also a utility plan here, and it's showing a public sewer coming all the way into the site and making a right turn in front of the second unit. I'll let the applicant talk about water service. I couldn't even find it on your utility map, but it must be there. And I think that's it, except for this is Pat Sissel did the engineering on this, and he's always really good about trying to show how it impacts the surrounding properties and stuff and what might happen in the future. And on the west, we have that existing home that's right here, and a very odd-looking drive that comes in here that looks like it had been planned for future partitioning in the future. And so he shows the possibility of a duplex here and a duplex here in the future, which seems very plausible that might happen. And that's all staff had in their report. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions? No. Okay. Let's move along to the applicant.
Here.
Okay, yep. State your name and address, and you have 15 minutes.
I don't think I'll need all that. My name is Darren Monin. I live at 23633 South Rondovic Drive here in Canby. Long-term Canby resident, lived here all my life. I went to kindergarten through high school here. Myself and my partner, who's here, Mr. Thompson, are the owners of that property and several other properties here in town where we've done this same sort of situation. We tried to buy something when we could afford it and improve the property according to your plans of infill a lot of times, or buy an older property, tear it down, and then build another property depending on whatever the situation was. This particular property we purchased probably, I don't know, 18, 19 years ago or something. We've had it for quite some time, been waiting for the right time to come along to go ahead and do something with it. And then we feel that time is now. So the back part of it is unimproved. It's just kind of lays in waste. The house has run its course. We feel it's time to upgrade and do something different. So we've proposed the two triplexes in there. We've got the same building that we've built some time ago across town over here. It's on the corner of 4th and right across from the water tower. The first street name escapes me, but so that same building we've done before. If anybody wanted to drive by or hasn't driven by there yet, or if you can recall driving by there at some point, it's there. When we build these things, we do them for long term. We've never built one and sold it. We always have retained them, so we build them a little nicer than somebody said an apartment earlier. It's nothing against apartments, but they're nothing like apartments. They're houses and duplexes and triplexes, and there's a council member within the city of Canby that lives in one, and he can attest, I think they're quite nice. We do long-term stuff in them and inside them and outside of them, so that they're quality homes that we keep and retain and take care of. We pay for the landscaping. It's always nice. It's kept up. We have landscaping service. We pay the garbage. Tenants don't pay the garbage to make sure that the garbage makes it to the street and makes it out. We just recently, up until February this year, we have managed them internally. It's gotten to the point where we needed to bring on an outside professional management company to do that. And so we have done that. And so we vet all of our applicants. We don't have a high turnover rate. People tend to live there for a long time. We're around and we're in there often. We're in the community. This particular road, I'm up and down a lot. I teach at Canby High School. I have for the last 12 years. I do the building construction class there. And so that's the way I get to work every day and home. So I go by there often. And then we drive past our other properties a lot and make sure that they're well maintained and kept up. We're pretty proud of them, and we put a lot of effort and money into them. Those two buildings are the same, except for some minor details on the one that faces township to address a couple of code We had to wrap the porch around. You'll see that on one of the elevation plans. But other than that, they are identical buildings.
Aaron, it's Fourth and Fir.
Fourth and Fir is where the other properties are over here. Beyond that, I don't see us coming. I know that there's often, I've gone through one of these or two of these before, and I know it's a lot of times people are concerned about what's going to end up in their neighborhood. We feel like we're going to really improve their neighborhood. I know that people have concerns, and some of which I'm sure is going to be voiced in a moment here, but we put a lot of thought, effort, and time and money into these projects, and it wasn't just something that we decided to throw up in there and walk away from, or to try to turn a quick buck. There's some examples that I think that we've seen in town, some people that build and sell things, and they're in the business of that. We're not in that business. We're in the business of building these and retaining them, and that's what we've done. We have a history of doing that of about 20 years now. So that's all I have.
Do we have any questions? I do, actually. So how much would one of those units actually rent for? Or I assume it's not month to month, but it would be a lease?
We typically lease for 1 year, and then at the end of the year, for that reason, we don't like the turnover. There's a lot of effort that goes into getting someone in there and vetting them and going through once they've lived in there, getting them out. So it's not in our best interest to have some turnover every 6 months or something. To answer your question about the rents, once we get into the actual the construction plans of this, we'll be able to come up with a number, but somewhere in the neighborhood of, I would guess, $1,400.
Okay.
Possibly a little bit more, but it's going to depend. We're already into this project, as you probably are aware. The city made us come in and in anticipation of doing something there. They paved that road, and they didn't want us to tear it up again to get our utilities in there. So they asked us to get in there in basically an 11th hour thing, which we accommodated them, and pull the sewer line across and pull the water line across. So the infrastructure's there, ready for it. And I will tell you, that wasn't a cheap proposition.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other proponents? You know who you are, but for the record, name and address.
Pat Sissel Engineering, 375 Portland Avenue, Gladstone. Brian, can you go to the site thing? I just wanted to mention a few things regarding the site plan. Darren talked about how they put a lot of thought into this, and one thing that I wanted to point out is there's right here in the center, there's a central trash enclosure. It's not required by code, but they've done enough of these projects, they know what it looks like to have garbage cans and recycling bins pulled out, and having half a dozen of them out along Township Road wouldn't be sightly. And the first time I met with them, that was one of their requirements, was we need a central location for trash. Some of the other thought that went into this is, the code speaks to having your parking screened. The parking for, my pointer's not working so well.
Well, mine works, and so right along here, is this where you're talking about the screening?
It's going now.
So these units here, this building won't have, you can see how tight the building is up to the sidewalk. And the purpose is, it was intended that these units wouldn't have parking in front of the garages. And that is to meet the code criteria. The code speaks to having parking behind or to the side of buildings. So it's intentional that there isn't parking in front of these, so people driving by aren't going to see cars parked right out in front. There are garages here, and there's a little space in front of the garage where you can have a bike or do some work on your car without blocking the sidewalk. But the parking was intentionally put back here in the middle of the site. There's one ADA parking stall and an aisle here next to it that cars traveling by could possibly see back to it, but we assume that because it is an ADA stall, it'll probably be the least used stall in the complex. But we have shared parking in here, so these units, there's 2 parking spaces required per unit, so 12 total for the 6 units on the site. We've got 15, which include 6 in garages, 3 in front of this building, in front of the garages, and then a total of 6 others, including the 1 ADA stall. Regarding this area over here, this is a paver patio. The intent is to give people in the complex some place to gather. Table, chairs, if somebody wants to hold a birthday party, there's an area here where they can get together, and it's permeable. Rainwater's going to soak through. It's not an extra hard surface, but again, it's a little more upscale than what you would typically see in most developments of this size.
Can we go to landscape plan, please?
Brian mentioned the arborvitae hedge along the property line here. That wasn't something that came out of the neighborhood, well, kind of came out of the neighborhood meeting, but when we went to the neighborhood meeting, our application hadn't been submitted yet. We're still going through the process. That's a requirement. When we went and met with the neighbors, the driveway, we actually had this driveway along this property line. Our traffic study was still being worked on by the city's traffic engineer. After the neighborhood meeting, we found out that the site distance wasn't adequate on that side, and we were told to move it to the west side of the property.
At what date did you have the neighborhood meeting?
June 1st.
Okay.
And it was after that neighborhood meeting that we found out that the site distance, I don't remember the exact date that the traffic study came from, you might have that. But it was at sometime after that we found out that the site distance was inadequate due to the wall located in front of this property. And so we flipped the site plan. And in pretty much all other aspects, the site plan is similar to what was shown to the neighborhood. It's just a mirror version of it. The arborvitae that are located here, it was discussed at the neighborhood meeting, but it was discussed along this property line instead. But we basically took our landscaping plan and mirrored it. So there are arborvitae located along here that'll screen headlights. There's also arborvitae located around the trash enclosure to screen the trash enclosure. And it's difficult to see on here, but there's a lot of trees that are planned behind the rear of each unit. You can see those better on the landscape plan in your packet. As far as utilities, as Darren mentioned, the sanitary sewer was put in Township Road and stubbed out of the street. A new manhole was placed out in front of this project and stubbed out of the roadway at the driveway location here. A new water line was brought across the street so that a fire hydrant can be placed right in front of the property. All other utilities are either underground along the frontage or overhead out in front of the site. So I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you have regarding.
Well, any questions?
What height arborvitae are you going to start with?
6 foot is what's called out on the landscape plan.
So, in reviewing the letter from William and Nancy Crory, that was one of their concerns, was that the headlights would be flashing right into their bedroom. And it so their letter was dated July 27th. And you had the neighborhood meeting on June 1st.
The traffic study was done on June 17th.
Okay, so I'm trying to reconcile some of the things that they brought up in their letter with the timeline for the neighborhood meeting, then going back and revising the plan, that sort of thing. So I'm concerned, and this one, I don't know if they're here tonight, but if they are, there they are. So maybe I'll just wait until I hear from them. But my concerns are going to be that they don't think that they were fully informed post for some of this stuff, and so we'll just wait to hear from them. But I just wanted, if you want to address that now or in the rebuttal segment.
Well, I'll address it a little bit now. And when we have a neighborhood meeting, we explain to folks that we're required to come to the neighborhood meeting before the application is submitted. So it's a work in progress. And sometimes things change. The traffic study is one of the most, takes the longest amount of time of anything with an application because of the back and forth between the city and then the city's traffic engineer. And so usually they're one of the first things to get started, and they're typically one of the last things to get completed. Unfortunately, in this case, and this is probably the first time it's happened, where the traffic study came out and it had a significant impact on the layout of the project. Same number of units, same intensity of development, similar development, it's just a mirror image. So I think we had the discussion of whether a new neighborhood meeting is required for this, and it's such a similar development that we didn't feel it was necessary to hold another neighborhood meeting, because they have everyone who was at the neighborhood meeting would receive notice of the application, would have the chance to come and see the application materials and be here tonight.
Any more questions for?
I have one. Can you explain the parking again? Are they double car garages?
They're single car garages.
Okay.
So there's 6 units, so there'll be a total of 6 parking spaces in garages. And then there is one ADA parking space here. So that would be 7. And then there's a parking space in front of these 3 units, in front of their garage,
So in their driveway?
in their driveway.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be, so now we're up to 10, and then there's 4 spaces here and a compact space here.
So basically, the people that would live in the units at the bottom of the screen would park in their garage and then in their driveway, and the units at the top would use their garage and then the other 3 spaces if they had 2 adults with cars there.
Yes.
That's the idea.
Yes. And then there would be a few extra spaces on top of that.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, Pat. Are there any more proponents? Okay. Opponents? Is there anybody that would like to speak? You're up. Just state your name and address and
My name is Bill Crory. My address is 12720 South Caris Road. I'm the owner of 599 Lupine, which is the second one in
That one?
south. Yes. I wrote the letter, which you all have copies of. I'm not going to go over it, but I have other concerns I'd like to go over. One of the main concerns I had was which was kind of addressed, the timeline of the public neighborhood meeting. We all went, we were told one thing, other thing came up. we were told, thank you very much, because I'd have missed it, that there was going to be this meeting and we'd get a notification. My tenant didn't get a notification, nobody on Lupine got a notification, and I didn't get a notification until I went into the Planning Commission and said, I thought we were going to have this meeting. Well, it's a week away, and I went, holy cow. So I felt that there should have been another neighborhood meeting or something. It just seems like there's something weird going on that didn't get the notice to the meeting. We get this, and it's not anything like the neighborhood meeting talked about, nothing. There's a new slough. The southern development structure was moved within 7 feet of the property line of my neighborhood, the third one down. This biotension slough that was added, was it in the original? So it wasn't discussed at the neighborhood meeting, so it isn't a true mirror image. That wasn't in there. It truthfully drains all the impervious surface of the driveways, the roadway, and the parking structures into a 14 by 209 foot trough or slough or biotension retaining. And my concern is who's going to maintain it, who's going to assume the liability, who's going to pay the bond and insurance on that if something happens. Second of all the road oils from cars, etc., will drain into that. I understand it's and we've built retention, detention ponds, my company has, but the road oils and stuff will just accumulate in there and just intensify. I just feel that's a terrible idea. I know the city is trying to do the right thing with their asking for this kind of bioretention to mitigate stormwater problems. But with the mosquito infestations and stuff like that with standing water, I'd be totally against it. The driveways on the north development building were decreased in length, effectively eliminating any parking in front. I don't know. I just feel that there should have been another neighborhood meeting to go over some of these things. Another concern I have is the parking, which I went over in my letter, but things have changed. Your code, table 1610.050, one additional guest parking space shall be provided for every 5 units for each development, and more often. From the property plan, you'll notice that this is 2 developments. They're dividing one lot into 2 separate developments. Each development is supposed to have this guest parking, and right now it does not. All the guest parking is in the northern development. So technically, it is not meeting your own code, period. The second concern, which is more concern to me, is that the northern building has a driveway entrance that's 6.5 feet long, backed up to a 5-foot driveway, giving you 11.5 total feet. So even backing out of the garage, I don't know how people get egress or into their garages. Backing out, have to stop in the street to pull the garage door down, even if there's a garage door opener. I just don't think so. I own 8 properties, rental properties, and I've never once, since 1981, had a tenant that put their car in the garage. The garage was not a garage. The garage was a storage area. So I'm not saying that that won't happen 6 times here, but I'm just saying in my experience, and I've done it for a while, that doesn't happen. And the problem with that is, where are these cars going to go? And I think that they're going to be parked on the street across Township Road. There is parking on the street, but there are mailboxes, so that's going to create the problem when all that parking starts going there with the mail people. So I'm very distressed on the parking. The last thing is, I didn't know how to read this, but it says the minimum yard requirements, which are 16.18.030D1, the street yard on that northern development is supposed to have 10 feet of street, of yard up to the street. There's nothing. So it's just straight concrete. There's a sidewalk and this ramp, and there's a little porch that comes out and maybe a planter in front of the porch, and that's it. I don't think that meets your requirement. So Those are my concerns. Basically, the parking, the open water slough, and the headlight business going in that's being addressed on this plan. We were not given a landscaping plan, a utility plan, or any of that with the data. Do you have any questions of me?
Any questions? Questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents that would like to speak? Please state your name and address.
My name is Carlene. I'm at 609 South Lupine. So my house is the third lot on Lupine.
That one?
No, down, correct, that lot. So initially, our concern is that first neighborhood meeting that was held in June 1st, we were never notified. We never even knew that this was happening until the construction for that water pipe or whatever was being brought in. The construction crews let us know that this development was actually starting to occur. Our concern is that our property is actually 2 feet higher than the plot that is in discussion. Our fence is not at legal privacy length. We would need at least a 2-foot retaining wall so we could have our legal 6-foot privacy fence. That existing fence that is now there, which is owned by the management company, it is falling down. I had to go out and put boards up to hold it up. It is not kept up, it's not up to date. The past tenants that have been in this rental for the last 20 years or so have been extremely unruly. The cops have been called numerous occasions. There was an occurrence on July 4th where there was gunshots that were actually fired, and the Canby PD SWAT team or what have you actually came and surrounded the house. There have been parties up on the roof, which also consisted of a couch up on the roof, which that the police department had to go up and detain people up off the roof on this July occasion. The lot is consistently cluttered with garbage. It's always been cluttered with broken down vehicles. People that were having the parties there, that lot has been filled with vehicles for the parties that would go on into the wee hours of the morning. We've made consistent requests with the renters there if they could please, calm down the parties. Never was heard. They would also, that back lot was also used as like a mud bog. They would go out and do their 4-wheelers and spin cookies or what have you with their vehicles in the back lot. Several occasions asked again for them to quit, never happened. So our concern is that, one is our privacy, and their past tenants have not been good citizens, basically.
Okay. You don't feel like that this would be an improvement over that? I can't imagine couches on the top of the roofs. But, yeah,
It's a concern.
this is a concern. Okay, got it. Are there any other opponents? Okay, please state your name and address.
My name is Keith Kibberlin. I'm currently residing at the 599 Lupine, and in the 2.5+ years I've been there, actually, I guess almost 3 now. Again, with the tenant, I know your issue was that this might improve it. It does go back to, their tenant records saying that they love having long-term tenants in there. But yet these people are in there forever, and police have been called there over a dozen times, and yet they kept their same tenants. So is that really the record you want, just to have the same tenants that are doing this kind of activity in those locations? It doesn't run for their track record of saying that, they're trying to improve this, because they knew this was going on all along, and yet they still remain the same tenants. I mean, we've had issues with the tenants behind us numerous times, same as our other neighbor, and so I guess it just runs to their track record, and so that's why I'm in agreement with her on that. Again, with the lighting was an issue with us, and I guess just the 2 stories looking down. I know our neighbor to the east of us, they're only a 1-story house, and there are going to be 2 stories going next to them with windows looking right down into her back window in the yard. So I guess these are all the issues I have. And also the lighting, the night lighting, I didn't see where that was going to be on here, if that could be discussed at some point, but that's going to be pointing into any of the houses along the border of those locations. That's all.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Are there any other opponents? Okay, please state your name and address.
I'm John Calvert, and I live at 378 Southeast 7th Way. It's lot 10 to the south of the development there.
Is it on there? Anywhere?
It's not on that one. It's to the south side of it.
Okay.
Your sheds are probably there, one of the sheds.
Yes. Yeah. I would I concur with some of the other concerns about the process and if there should have been an additional hearing. I mean, the plan has totally flip-flopped, and we did not know that until we got this meeting notice. The other thing is, being on that side and being a two-story houses going in there, we would like to see some trees planted along the backside there so that, they're not looking down into our yards and vice versa. We're not looking back at them. So we would like some kind of screening along that backside, along the property line. There's benefit to having trees there. It's the south side of the property. Gets all the weather and sun, so it'll help maybe reduce their energy costs in the summertime by providing shade. So we would just like to have that screening in place.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Any questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents?
I'm at the same address as she. Can I still say something?
Absolutely.
It's my daughter. She did a good job. I just want
Of course you did.
to reiterate that we weren't notified of the first neighborhood meeting in June 1st.
Name and address.
Oh,
Name
I'm
and-
sorry.
name and
Cynthia
address.
May,
Okay.
609 South Blue Pine.
Yeah.
We weren't notified of the neighborhood address or meeting on June 1st. And my concern is that there's not a level elevation between the two lots. And where will our privacy go with the 2 stories and 6 units there? And with the type of renters they've attracted and have had there, we're going to have 5 times that kind of movement and activity and busyness around. So where's the peace and quiet going to be for us? And this is right against our house. We only have 20 feet from our back door to the property line. And how far set off they set from the property line, I don't know, but it concerns me with the motions and the movement of cars. We'll have headlights in our windows. It won't be a privacy thing for us, or quiet. And quality of life, I believe, will go down. And I've lived in that house for 20 years now. And I hope to retire in that house. But with this in my backyard, literally in my backyard, I don't know that it'll happen for me, that I'll stay there and retire. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Please state your name and address.
I'm Nancy Corey, and my address is 12720 South Terrace Road. We are the rentees on the Blue Pine House. The one comment I had was, he had mentioned that they've had the same type of situation on houses that they've built, like on 4th and 3rd, something like that. We went and looked at them. They were very nice. They're duplexes, not triplexes, and they're also in a neighborhood that has a lower house value level than where all these single homes are here, which are a higher value house. That concerns me. Duplexes are much more easy for us to deal with than a triplex. And the value of our homes, I think, is going to go down because of this. So that's all.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Anybody that would consider themselves neutral on the matter? Any rebuttal?
All right. So, a couple of things. I'll just try to go through these basically per person. A lot of the same issues. So I'll probably hit on them more than once. Bill, that came first, had mentioned that he didn't get a notice. We are required to get the information to the city, and then in a timely manner, and then it goes out. Am I correct about that? We sent out the notice. We get the required notices from a title company, and we sent that out. When we sent it out in a timely order, most of the people got it. There was a lot of people there. We can't know why. Excuse me. Some folks didn't get it. There was nothing shady going. We weren't trying to keep some people specifically out. In fact, the majority of the people that live right around there were there at that meeting and voiced their concern. In terms of having another meeting, I think Pat addressed that and said that there's no requirement to have another neighborhood meeting. Maybe it would have been nice for some folks. Having meetings for some of us is we have a lot of meetings, and so I appreciate the fact that somebody would have liked to seen another meeting possibly, but again, I assure you we're not trying to pull one off over on somebody. There was no sleight of hand there. We weren't required to have one. We had the meeting. After the fact, the traffic study came out, and it came out in the traffic study that it's advisable to flop that plan, and we did that. And then tried to do everything in keeping with what we learned at that neighborhood meeting. Some folks had talked about trees and this and that, and we tried to accommodate those things. There was other talk of some fencings and things that we assumed that as we go along the path we can talk about and work with. The plan is virtually the same. There's nothing that we've tried to throw off on there. The bioretention issue with the bioretention that Bill had, I'll let Pat, he's the expert on that, talk about, and as well as the parking issues that he had, some of which are more personal concerns than they are concerns with code and things like that. We've met those, and we feel, and I didn't hear anything that proved that we hadn't. I believe it was Karen, is that correct? The next person that came up, again, about the neighborhood meetings, and I apologize for you not getting notice. I don't know why. We sent it out. Everybody, the majority of the people got it, and there were a lot of people there, a lot more than we would have thought. I will take exception with her comment that she's lived there for 20 years, I guess, with her mother, and that our past, we've always had bad renters in there. I take that a little personal on a couple of levels. One, my mother lived in that house for a good 10 years of the time that we owned it, and she was a mouse. I don't think you had any issues with her. Yeah, these past renters that we had in there switched, and they were allowed to stay longer than there was a party that was in there. They moved out, a more responsible party, they moved out, and that other party, the other half, stayed there. They were allowed to stay there a little longer, only because we were in transitioning behind the scenes. It takes a lot of time to put this together and a lot of effort, and all along we were trying to do that. So it was, and there's a lot of laws that you have to follow about getting a renter out, and so it was tricky, and we can't. One of the guys who had an issue with it said he had 8 rentals. He should appreciate and understand that we didn't want to have a house sit vacant. I don't think you wanted a house vacant in your neighborhood any longer than it's already been either. So we had to kind of stay the course with those folks. They were not ideal renters, I will give you that. And you can go to any one of our other properties and you'll see and find that we have good renters. Ask the neighbors, go knock on the doors around any other properties that we have, and I'll provide you the addresses to all of them. No problem with that. I take some real homage with the idea that we have less than desirable neighbors. That I find that a little offensive. And then any of those issues that came up, I addressed personally most always. The gun incident, unbelievable. That could happen to anybody. I don't know who would expect something like that. The police addressed that. We spoke with the officer that went there. The couch thing, aware of it. We addressed it, talked to them about it. I myself was over there a few times talking to those folks. Again, the reason they were allowed to stay is we were behind the scenes trying to do this and trying to figure out a time when the timing was right to ask them to move. They could have hunkered down in there if they wanted to. By law, for a long time, we'd have had a hard time getting them out of there. And then we had not planned on getting another renter in there after them. Our plan all along was to do something with that property. This is our ultimate plan, but we're doing something with that property, so we're going to get somebody else in there. So I hope I addressed that part. I think it was Keith talked about the past rental behavior. I've spoken to that. And then again, our track record. John spoke of a 2-story building and adding trees, and we did talk about that. And we've got trees in that plan, and we were open at the night of that neighborhood meeting at the fire department. We were more than willing to talk about trees and adding trees. There was one gentleman there that I don't see here that he thought it was having some trees and some areas would be nice. We talked about that. We agreed. Very agreeable to that stuff. Again, Cynthia with the no notification, I can't address that. We do what we're supposed to do according to it, and we get it done. And then the fence issue in the back, again, that's an elevation issue that I can't look. I don't want to peer over your fence and see what the grade is there. So we would address that, and if there was a retaining wall or a wall that had to be put up there, we would certainly be in agreement of doing that. So that's all I have. You have questions?
Okay. Any questions?
No, sir.
Thanks.
4th and 3rd is a 3.
Oh, that is the one gal had mentioned that the neighborhood, she went and looked at our other neighborhood. That exact building is on 4th and 3rd. The same exact building we're proposing to build. It sits there. The duplex buildings all around that corner are all of ours. That triplex that faces that, the duplex that's next to it is ours. The duplex building that's next to that is ours. The house in the corner is ours, and the other duplex that sits next to that are ours. That whole corner is ours. So I invite you to go take a look at the landscaping over there, the parking, talk to the neighbors, any of it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to address a couple issues that were brought up, I think, by Bill. Regarding the bioretention area, the code really speaks to bioretention. LID facilities are promoted by Chapter 1649. They're mentioned at least 4 times in that code, including in the purpose and objectives statement of the chapter. We get points in the design review matrix for doing bioretention. It's heavily promoted by the code, and that's the reason why it's there. As far as the how it'll operate, it's there to collect low flows. Will go into it. It's got catch basins in it, so if much water collects in it at all, it will overflow into the catch basins and then go into the dry well. But he mentioned oils and greases coming off the driveway. Well, that's the purpose of that facility, is to do just that, for oils and greases to go in there and get the pollutants to be uptaken by the plants in the facility rather than going down into the groundwater. So I know when you have a spill, an oil spill or something, you want that oil to land in shallow soils, not in your deep soils where it can get down to groundwater. Regarding the width of the driveway, that building, that first building up by the street, it's got 6.5 feet from the garage door to the sidewalk that runs in front of the unit, and then it's got a 5-foot sidewalk. And then it's got 24 feet of driveway beyond that. So from the garage door to the curb on the far side of the driveway is about 36 feet. I think that's plenty of room for people to be able to swing out of those units, swing out of those garages and get turned. Typical parking space is only got 24 feet on the back side of it in a parking lot. and that's the width of this driveway, so we figured it's adequate. If it's adequate in a parking lot, it should be adequate in this situation as well. Regarding the street yard question, street yard is, you've got front yard and then you've got street side. Most codes call it a street side. This code refers to it as a street yard. And the street yard on this building is this area here. This is the front. This is the street side. It's a side yard facing a street, and that dimension is 15 feet on our plan, and that meets the requirement. Regarding lighting, lighting will meet code. There's a condition of approval that says to submit lighting fixtures, and we intend to submit lighting plan and lighting fixtures to planning for approval as the process goes on. And finally, I just want to speak to kind of the general concern about the development as a whole. This is an R1.5 zone. Can we go back to the zoning code, the zoning map? That again, this is an area where R1 is transitioning to R1.5 and then into R2. It's not intended for it to be identical to R1. It is an area of transition. Duplexes and triplexes are outright permitted uses in the R1.5 zone. So it is different, but different doesn't necessarily mean not compatible. There's a lot of different housing types that are different, but they're certainly compatible with one another. And it's been mentioned that these are apartments. They're not apartments, they're triplexes. There's a different feel there. The homes are going to be not much larger than the residential homes around it. It's not like it's got 120-foot long dimensions, and these buildings are 60 feet long. So,
any questions?
Will the existing building be demolished?
Pardon me, you said
when will the existing structure be demolished that renters are in now?
That would be the first thing that would happen at the site. I would expect once the project receives an approval, it would be approximately 6 weeks, probably is about as fast as plans could get approved. With some certainty that their project is approved, they could get a demo permit faster.
If I may, we already have a demolition permit.
Okay. So again, that would be obviously the first thing that would happen is that the building would be demoed. If I may, I forgot to address landscaping. If you don't mind, I'd just like to touch on that. With our submitted landscape plan, there are 4 trees proposed along the south property line and a number of shrubs. In this corner, this tree here is a western red cedar. Is planned on our plan. It is shown as a 6 to 7 foot tall tree when it's planted. And then behind each unit there are 2 shrubs, and then there's also a Kuza dogwood. I don't know, I can't say I know exactly what that looks like, but it is a 2-inch caliper tree, which is about, and most street trees when they're planted are 1.5 inches, so it's a little larger tree than what would typically go in a street tree type situation. And then each of these other units, also all of the units have trees proposed in the backyards. That's something that we heard at the neighborhood meeting. So when I understand the neighbors didn't have all the information at the neighborhood meeting, but the landscape plan was something that we hadn't even started at the neighborhood meeting, and it was developed based upon concerns that we heard from the neighbors at the meeting.
Okay. Any more questions? Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public testimony and time for questions, if any, from us to them or staff. Okay. So we'll begin discussion. Well, I guess there was a question. Can a garage be considered a parking space, Brian?
The code does allow that. Not every code in every city does, but our code does allow you to count in a residential zone a garage as one of the required parking spaces, and we've utilized it several times. I'm not quite sure when the code adopted that. I really don't know, but it's been there for a while. And it's certainly a factor in that a lot of people, and it's reared its head in Canby and some of our townhome developments and such, and we've heard directly from people that they've run out of or are having parking issues, and they think the number one reason is because people aren't parking in their garage. But that becomes a very, very tricky issue for a governmental entity and a city in terms of enforcement. So the best thing I could possibly think of is maybe a condition that requires them to include a provision in their CC&Rs or something, but we don't enforce CC&Rs. That's not something the city participates in, but at least would set up something where maybe on the outset there's an intention that you actually utilize your garages for parking and make note of the reason why, because parking is short. But it's a difficult issue for a city to deal with.
Sure. Any other questions?
I have a comment, if it's okay.
Now we are going to start with discussion and deliberation. Larry, you started off.
Oh, okay. Well, because of the letters and stuff, I did visit the site, and I live over in Valley Farms. Parking, I think, will be an issue there, but there is street parking on Township across the street, and I believe that if parking is an issue, it's the residents of the triplex that'll have to suffer with it. And when you go to rent that place, you're going to see what kind of parking you have. But I think eventually there's going to be people parked on Township. The two-story stuff, people looking in their yards and stuff with all these codes where all our lots keep getting smaller and smaller. If you want a daggum yard, you better build a two-story house. And I live in a two-story house in Valley Farms, and all of my neighbors, most of my neighbors have two-story houses, but there are ranches, and you can look out of your top bedroom windows down into everybody's yard. These guys, I think, they've met the code. I don't know what else you can do. And it looks like it's going to be a nice complex. Well, I personally would vote in favor of it.
Chris?
I guess my only comment would be I understand I've had unruly neighbors before too, and that's a stress and a headache for the landlord and for the neighbors. But as a planning commission, we're just here to make sure the codes are followed. We can't do anything with that. So maybe another private meeting amongst you all would be a good idea. But it does look like a nice complex, and I would hope that the tenants come in and take pride in where they live. And I would take heart in the fact that if one neighbor is unruly, the other 5 households are going to get on them, not to mention all of you good people, and hopefully bring things under control. And code enforcement at Canby PD is your friend, so utilize that. So anyway, it does look like a nice place. I wrote down how much the rent would be because I've got two lovely daughters looking for a place to move into in here in Canby. So yeah, our job is to make sure the code is met and the rest of the things we can't touch.
Comments?
I'll throw in a comment. I think with land becoming more and more valuable and critical and in hard supply, the buildings have to go higher. It's just a fact of life, and it's unfortunate for existing one-level structures like I live in when these go next door, but I'm afraid it's just a fact of life that we're going to have to live with. As long as the zoning permits it and there's no violation, I can't oppose it.
Darren?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it would be a nice addition to what's there today, but it meets all the code requirements and the zoning, so.
I would agree. It does meet all the codes, and Commissioner Rocha is correct. Our job here is to just make sure that the codes are all in place and are properly followed. I would encourage you to. I can't do anything about it, but I would encourage you to have another neighborhood meeting and work out maybe with some of these neighbors. Obviously, there are some concerns here, so it might be something that I would suggest that you meet with some of these people and listen to what they have to say, and if there's anything that you can do to help them allay their fears and concerns. I think that would go a long way to having good neighbor relations. So other than that, though, I would say it's a nice plan and meets all of the requirements. So I will entertain a motion.
Can I ask a question about condition one? Brian, because it says if we support the TIA conclusion regarding the access exception, then that condition is no longer needed.
That's correct.
So
if you're accepting the findings of the traffic study that said and recommended, as they studied everything, that, hey, providing an exception to not meeting the normal driveway separation requirements in a street that has driveways everywhere, it makes it impossible to redevelop the property if you follow it, and they've done the best that they can in this particular instance, and they don't think it's going to result in a safety hazard. So you'd be accepting that, and this condition would go away.
So I make a motion to accept the transportation impact analysis and strike condition one. Is that right?
Brian?
That's right.
I make a motion to strike condition one and accept the transportation impact analysis.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we accept the plan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Again, encourage you to meet with your neighbors.
We would welcome that. If you guys want to put your name down here.
John, do we still have to approve the thing with all the conditions? That was just striking. That was striking just the first one. Do we need another motion to approve the?
Well, your motion was a little bit gray in that I just assumed that you were approving the recommendation as submitted with striking.
That's what I assumed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you did it okay. Yeah.
Just want to be sure.
Okay.
Question, is there an appeal process? Appeal process? Can I see your office and get it tomorrow?
Okay. Okay. New business, there is none that I can see here. Accepted. Again, welcome back, Lainey.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
That's the new business. So I will entertain a motion for final decision to approve DR 16-05 MLP 16-02 Monon Construction.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve DR 16-05/MLP 16-02 mode construction. As presented.
Okay, we have moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Items of interest from the staff.
Well, we listed one that we're expecting that our next regular scheduled meeting is actually going to be September 26th. So the earlier September meeting's probably going to be canceled. We don't have any items for that, and we're just really swamped in trying to keep up with what we do have.
Okay.
Just work Lainey harder.
Yeah.
Well, come on.
Hospital again.
Some of the things that we're working on right now is assisting the applicants with the Hanlon development, which is a redevelopment of the half block that we're sitting on right here. And then we're also working with the applicant on the Canby Utilities new site on South Pine Street. So they will be building their new building and eventually moving away from their office that's in this block. And we're also working with applicants for BB Steel and an expansion out on Southeast Township Road next to American Steel. And that property will be an interesting one in that they're actually in the county right now. So we're in cooperation with the applicant and the county trying to get them to meet city standards without the potential of annexation. Simply because the city has chosen at this point not to force it, but they need our utility services. And so they're still deciding whether they're actually going to annex or not, and we'll see how that works out. But we're trying to work it out so they can potentially get our utility services if they meet our city standards.
Okay.
A tit for tat.
Quid pro quo.
Mr. Chair, I will be not here on the 12th or the 26th. I'll be away for business.
Well, apparently the 12th is not an issue, but the 26th. Big demerit for you, my friend.
I know.
Okay.
Can we just put a cardboard stand up there?
Yeah.
I could.
Okay.
Take a selfie.
You've got a month to get that made.
Okay.
I'll have Mary do that for me.
You have a question?
Are we allowed to say what's going into the Scott building, or is that a matter of, I don't know
Yeah,
how
I
that
mean,
works?
I don't know the actual tenants. I just know that there's a drive-through type restaurant
I know
and
what
another
they are, I just
restaurant.
don't know if it's okay to say it. I don't know if it's, I said I know what they are, I just don't know if that's
Yeah,
okay.
at this point, it's past any appeals or anything like that, so yeah, I would think it's fine.
Jimmy John's.
Okay.
T-Mobile and a pizza place. It's Mod, is it Mod?
That's what I heard. But you know how rumors are.
Yeah, it's something like
Rumors
that. I
of
don't
war.
think that's the one.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Good for the kids.
So, any items of interest or discussion from us?
Busy weekend. Heavy.
I would like, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. I'd like everybody to stay for just a minute. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned.
I wasn't in favor of that.
You were?